Betrayed by my husband, and manipulated by his family, I fights to take back my life. Please, before I proceed, kindly hit the subscribe button. Like, share this video to your loved ones. Thank you so much. Standing in the middle of the busiest airport I've ever seen. People laughing, people crying. Leaving my home country was harder than I thought. Holding my suitcase, feeling both excitement and fear at the same time. It was a full-body feeling. The excitement was this buzz, right under my skin, like I'd had 10 cups of coffee. This was the first day of my real life. But the fear, oh, it felt like I was about to step off a cliff, and I had no idea if I'd be able to fly. The airport was crowded, but all I could think about was the life I was about to start. A life where I could be free and maybe even happy. It's funny, I was surrounded by thousands of people, but I felt completely alone in my own little bubble. I just kept picturing this new life, like a movie playing in my head. A cute little apartment, the freedom to be who I wanted to be, without anyone's expectations hanging over me. The idea of just being happy. It felt so huge, so revolutionary. I literally had to give myself a pep talk. Right there, in the middle of the chaos. I told myself, Sophia, this is your chance. No one can stop you now. But deep down, I wondered if I was making a huge mistake. It's one thing to say it, to be all brave and fierce. But there's always that tiny voice, isn't there? The one that whispers, are you sure about this? What if you fall flat on your face? I took one last look back, saw my family waving, and I just turned and walked. I was there. In a taxi, watching a brand new city flash past my window. I remember, a little as I finally got the key in the lock and pushed the door open. When I arrived at my new apartment, it was quiet. I trying to make it feel like home, putting every little thing in its place. Peaceful, but just loud. The emptiness of the room seemed to echo every single sound I made. So I started unpacking, just to have something to do, some noise to make. I put my little stack of books on the windowsill. I lined up my 3 mugs in the kitchen cabinet. Each little thing felt like I was trying to prove to the apartment, and to myself, that I was really here. That I belonged here. That first night was rough, I won't lie. The sun went down and the city lit up. It was beautiful, but it also made me feel so incredibly alone. The first night, I sat by the window, looking at the city lights, and for the first time, I felt both lonely and hopeful. All those lights were millions of people, living their lives, having dinner, laughing with friends. And I was just me. In an empty box, watching them. But there was a little flicker of hope in there, too. A feeling that maybe, one day I'd be one of those lights. Then came David. He appeared in my life like a sudden burst of light. Charming, funny, and kind. I couldn't help but feel drawn to him. And I know this is going to sound so cheesy, like something out of a romantic, but it's exactly how it happened. I was trying to read in a park, but mostly just feeling sorry for myself, and bam. This frisbee lands about an inch from my head. And this guy comes jogging over, apologizing like he's just committed a federal crime. He insisted on buying me a coffee to say sorry, and honestly, it was the first time I felt a genuine spark of excitement in weeks. That coffee turned into hours. We started spending time together, talking about our dreams and hopes. I felt warmth, something I hadn't felt in months. It was like the whole city, which had felt so gray and intimidating, just burst into color. He showed me all the hidden spots, the best places for noodles, the shortcuts through the city. We would just walk and talk for hours. And he listened. Like, after feeling invisible for so long, it was everything. For a while, everything seemed perfect, almost like a dream I didn't want to wake up from. It really did feel like a dream. He made my quiet apartment feel like a home. He filled it with laughter. I remember thinking, this is why I came here. And at the time, it felt completely worth it. Have you ever been so happy that it almost scares you? Like, it's so good you're just waiting for the other shoe to drop. That was me, in those first few months with David. It was this beautiful, blissful bubble of existence. Every single day was an adventure, and I was just floating. We laughed, cooked together, and shared secrets. I allowed myself to hope for a happy future. We'd try to follow some fancy recipe on YouTube and end up burning everything and laughing so hard we had to sit on the floor before just ordering a pizza. We'd talk until the sun came up. I told him things I'd never told anyone. He told me about his dream. Finally, truly, be myself. And he didn't just accept it, he seemed to love it. I started to let myself imagine a future. Our future. I remember this one specific moment so vividly. It wasn't anything huge. We were just on the couch, watching some silly movie. It was raining outside, and we were wrapped up in this old quilt. Sometimes, I caught myself thinking, maybe I've finally found someone who truly cares. And he just reached over and tucked a piece of hair behind my ear, so gently. And in that quiet moment, I felt this overwhelming sense of peace. Like I was finally home. The search was over. It's dangerous when you let someone have that much of your heart. You hand over the keys to your happiness, trusting them to take care of it. I gave him all of me, every vulnerable piece, every secret hope. I was building my entire world on the foundation of him. Little did I know, this happiness was only the calm before the storm. It's scary to look back now and see how fragile that foundation really was. I was living in a beautiful glass house, and I had no idea the storm was already gathering. When a light bulb is about to die, it flickers a little first. That's what it felt like. There wasn't a big bang or a sudden darkness. Just these little, almost unnoticeable flickers, warning me that something was about to go out. The easy, bright happiness we had started to dim, just a little, around the edges. It started with small things. He would hide his phone, sigh when I asked questions, or suddenly become distant. It was so subtle I thought I was imagining it. He'd be texting, and I'd walk into the room, and he'd immediately lock his phone and put it face down. Or I'd ask him about his day, and instead of the long, funny stories he used to tell, I'd just get a heavy sigh and a one-word answer. He was there, physically, but it felt like the real him was miles away. I tried so hard to brush it off, to ignore it at first, telling myself I was imagining things. But deep down, a voice kept warning me that something was wrong. I became the queen of making excuses for him. He's just stressed with work. He's tired. I'm being needy. I'm just insecure because I'm in a new country. I told myself a million stories to avoid facing the one that was probably true. Something was changing. The weirdest part was that we'd still have good days. We'd have a great date, and he'd be the old David again, and I'd grab onto that feeling with both hands. It was like a lifeline. See, everything's fine. It was all in my head. But then the distance would creep back in return. I couldn't shake the feeling that my perfect life was slowly unraveling, even as I clung to hope. I felt like I was trying to hold water in my hands. The harder I squeezed, the faster it seemed to be slipping away. David decides, it's the perfect time for me to meet his family. And honestly, a part of me was so relieved. I thought, okay, this is a good sign. I was just imagining things. I had no idea that I wasn't just walking into a family dinner. I was walking into the lion's den. David's family soon entered the picture. His mother and stepmother began offering advice, but it always felt like control. Oh, and the family was a lot. His parents were divorced, and both his mom, Eleanor, and his stepmom, Brenda, were these powerhouse women who seemed to be in a permanent, silent competition with each other. And their favorite sport, meddling in David's life. Their advice was always wrapped in this sweet, caring language, but it felt like I was being slowly suffocated by kindness. They criticized my choices, my clothes, my friends, even the way I spoke. It was never direct. It was always these side comments. The first time I met Eleanor, she looked at my favorite dress and said, "Oh, what a free-spirited choice, dear." So interesting. It wasn't a compliment. Brenda would tell me my accent was adorable, but that I should think about softening it to be taken more seriously at work. It made my skin crawl. And whenever I'd look to David for support, he'd just give this little shrug, like, that's just how they are. Their suggestions were like a constant stream of tiny tests. Every suggestion they made seemed harmless at first, but I soon realized they were testing my patience, trying to see how much they could manipulate me. "Oh, Sophia, you should really try this other hair salon. It's a bit rich. We think you two should start saving more, maybe you could cut back on going out with friends." Every time I'd agree, just to keep the peace, I felt like I was giving away a tiny piece of myself. I was so busy trying to win their approval that I didn't realize I was losing the war for my own identity. The family interference wasn't just an annoying side dish to our relationship, it became the main course. And my wonderful, supportive David, he just changed. He stopped being my partner and started being their ambassador. And then the gaslighting started. I didn't even know the word for it back then, I just knew that talking to him felt like walking into a funhouse of mirrors. Nothing was ever as it seemed, and I always ended up being the one who was wrong. If I brought up something hurtful, his mother said, his response would be, "You're just being way too sensitive. You know she didn't mean it like that." Or, my personal favorite, "Why do you always have to create drama?" I remember this one time so clearly. His stepmom, Brenda, sat me down and told me in this sickly sweet voice that my job was probably too stressful for me and that I should consider something less demanding, especially if David and I were going to have a family one day. I was so angry. When I told David, expecting him to be furious on my behalf, he just sighed. I hated that sigh. "Babe, you're twisting her words. She was just trying to say she cares about you and our future. You're overreacting." David suggested we get a joint bank account for bills and rent. It made sense, right? We were a serious couple. So I agreed. We were a team. But then his mother, Eleanor, who apparently used to be a banker, offered to help us invest. "You need to be smart with your money," she'd say, patting my hand. "Let me help you build a real future." David thought this was the best idea ever. Free financial advice from an expert. What could go wrong? Well, everything. Soon, money was being moved around in ways I couldn't follow. When I'd ask David about it, he'd throw around a bunch of financial terms he'd clearly just learned from his mother, and then end with, "Babe, don't worry about it. It's for us. Just trust me." That word, trust, started to feel less like a comfort and more like a command. If I questioned him, I wasn't being a good partner. I was being untrusting. The final step was when they convinced me to merge my own personal savings, the money I had worked so hard for, my in case of emergency fund, into their grand investment plan. I felt sick about it. A voice deep inside me was screaming, "No, don't do it." But I was so tired of fighting, so desperate to prove that I was the trusting, supportive girlfriend they wanted me to be, that I just did it. And just like that, my independence was gone. I was completely financially dependent on them. I had moved across the world to be free, and now I had to mentally ask for permission to buy a new pair of jeans. I was caught in their web, and it was woven with my own money. So, at this point, they had a handle on my emotions and my money. What's left? My friends. My support system. It's a classic tactic, the target. A person is much easier to control when they feel like they have no one else to turn to. And they were absolute masters at it. My best friend in the city, Clara, was this amazing, loud, hilarious woman. They hated her instantly. After they met her, Eleanor said to me, with this concerned look on her face, "She's very energetic, isn't she, dear? I just worry she might not be the most stable influence." After that, every time I made plans with Clara, David would suddenly have a family dinner we had to go to, or he'd spring a surprise date night on me. He'd lay on the guilt, "Oh, I just wanted to spend some time with you. But, okay, if you'd rather go out with Clara." So, I started canceling. And eventually, Clara's calls became less frequent. It breaks my heart to even think about it now. They had a reason why every single one of my friends was wrong for me. A male friend from work was obviously trying to get with you. An older couple I liked were boring and holding you back. It was a slow, systematic process of cutting every single thread that connected me to a life outside of them. Even my family back home became a problem. My weekly calls with my mom were suddenly an issue. David would complain I was living in the past, and that I needed to let go. Brenda would sweetly ask to say hi to my mom on the phone, and then later tell David, "I think her mother upsets her. She always seems so sad after they talk." They twisted my love for my family into a weakness. I started telling my parents less and less about what was really going on, because I didn't want to cause another fight with David. I was on a tiny island, and they had burned all the bridges. The only people left on the island were them. It happened at a huge family dinner at his mother's house. I mean, everyone was there. Aunts, uncles, cousins. It felt like I was on trial. And then, right as they were clearing the plates for dessert, David stands up and starts this big, dramatic speech. He's talking about soulmates and destiny, and it all sounds so beautiful, but it also sounds completely rehearsed. He was performing for his family, not talking to me. Then he gets down on one knee. He pulls out the ring. And before the words, "Will you marry me?" are even fully out of his mouth, the whole family just erupts. They're all clapping and cheering and looking at me. All these expectant faces, beaming at me. The pressure was suffocating. What was I supposed to do? Say no, right there, and humiliate him in front of his entire clan? My own voice, my own feelings, just got completely swallowed up by their excitement. My heart was beating, so fast, and it wasn't from joy, it was from panic. But I heard myself say, yes. It was this tiny, weak sound. And the room just exploded. His mom hugged me so tight it felt like she was branding me. His stepmom whispered in my ear, "Welcome to the family, dear." For good. And as David slid this huge, cold diamond onto my finger, it didn't feel like a promise. It felt like a handcuff. I hadn't just gotten engaged to David. I felt like I had been officially acquired by the entire family. If the proposal felt like a public performance, the wedding planning was. It was their blockbuster movie, and I was just an extra with no lines. Romantic ideas I had about my own wedding were just laughed off. It was never about us. It was about them, their reputation, and their control. I've always dreamed of a small wedding, simple and intimate, maybe in a beautiful garden. When I mentioned this, Eleanor literally scoffed. "Don't be ridiculous, Sophia. This is a very important, social event. We can't have our guests traipsing through the mud." The next day, she informed me that she had booked the grand ballroom at the most expensive hotel in the city. End of discussion. The wedding dress, that was a whole other nightmare. I wanted simple, comfortable. Brenda and Eleanor took me to a super fancy boutique, and they basically just played dress up with me. They picked out this massive, heavy, ornate gown that felt like I was wearing armor. When I tried to gently say it wasn't really me, Brenda put on this sad, wounded face and said, "Oh, but we pictured you in this one. It would make us so happy to see you walk down the aisle in it." Guilt. Every single detail was decided for me. The flowers, the music, the food. I just had to sit there and nod. The worst was the guest list. I had maybe 10 people on my side that I wanted to invite from back home. Their list had 300 names on it. Business partners, third cousins, people they hadn't seen in years. When I tried to protest, to say I wanted people there who actually knew and loved us, David just said, "Babe, it's easier to just let them handle it. It'll keep them happy." I felt like a ghost. They were planning a wedding for a perfect, compliant doll that looked like me, but I wasn't there at all. I was just an empty dress. You can live in a fog for a really long time. One unexpected moment to suddenly. I had started going to this place near our apartment just to steal 20 minutes of peace for myself every day. There was a barista there, a young woman named Maya. She was a student, I think. She had these really bright, observant eyes. And one day, she just looked at me as she handed me my coffee and said, "You okay? You look like you're carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders." I just kind of shrugged it off, but then she said something I will never, ever forget. My older sister used to have that same look. Right before she called off her wedding. It's the look of someone trying to pretend they're not drowning. Drowning. The word just hit me in the chest. That was it. That was the perfect word for how I felt. I just stared at her, and she must have seen the shock on my face because she immediately backed off, saying, "Sorry, none of my business." But it was too late. The damage was done. In the best possible way. I sat down, and her words just echoed in my head. I pulled out my phone and scrolled way, way back. I found a photo of me, from my first week in the country. I looked a little scared, sure, but my eyes were so alive, so full of hope. Then I found a recent picture from our engagement party. I was smiling, but it didn't reach my eyes. My eyes just looked empty. It was like looking at two different people. And suddenly, I saw it all. It wasn't just a series of unlucky events or difficult family dynamics. It was a pattern. It was a deliberate, slow-motion dismantling of me. The gaslighting, the isolation, the financial control, it was all connected. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't too sensitive. I was in a toxic, controlling situation. And David wasn't just caught in the middle, he was helping them. He was holding my head underwater. In that coffee shop, the fog finally lifted. And I knew I had to get out. I couldn't just keep pretending everything was fine. I owed it to myself, to that girl who first came to this country, with so many dreams, to at least try. To give David one last chance to choose us. I waited until we were home. That night, my voice was surprisingly calm. I just laid it all out. I said, David, I'm not happy. I feel like I'm disappearing. Your family is controlling every part of our life, and I need you to be on my team. I need you to stand up for me, for us. I explained how their comments made me feel, how the wedding planning was making me miserable, how I felt like I had no voice anymore. I wasn't accusing, just begging him to see me, to see what was happening. I just watched his face, praying I'd see a flicker of the man I fell in love with. There was nothing, just annoyance. He actually rolled his eyes. Sophia, not this again, my family is trying to help. They love you. Everything they're doing is to give us a good life. Why do you have to fight them on everything? I'm not fighting them, David, I'm fighting for me, for the person I was before they tried to turn me into someone else. And then he delivered the final blow. He stood up, and looked down at me, and said, you know what? Maybe they're right. You're less of a mess now. You're more put together. They know what's best. And if you have a problem with my family, then you have a problem with me. And that was it. Choosing them. He was telling me that he preferred this smaller, quieter, broken version of me. He didn't want a partner, he wanted a project they had completed. The love I thought we had, it wasn't real. It was conditional. And the condition was that I ceased to exist. In that moment, I knew I was utterly and completely alone in this relationship. And I knew it was over. What I found next told me it had been a lie from the very beginning. I knew I had to leave, but our lives were so tangled up. Especially our finances. I had this horrible, sinking feeling that there was more going on than I knew. One night, David was out with friends. He had this old laptop he never used, and I don't know why, but I just felt this pull. My gut was screaming at me to open it. My hands were literally trembling. I felt like a terrible person, snooping like that, but something stronger told me I had to. His email was still logged in. And I started searching. And there it was. An email chain between him and his mother, dating back months. The subject line was, asset management. I started reading, and I felt the blood drain from my face. It was a calculated, step-by-step plan to absorb my personal savings into their family's accounts. They called my hard-earned money a useful little bonus, and a good starting point. They discussed how to best convince me to transfer it, how to frame it as a smart investment for our future. The worst part was an email from his mother to him, after I had finally agreed to transfer my savings. It said, "Good job, son. Now it's all protected under the family trust." She's too emotional to ever understand the paperwork, so there won't be any issues. I had to put my hand over my mouth to keep from screaming. It wasn't just that they were controlling. It wasn't just that he didn't stand up for me. This was a conspiracy. They had targeted me. He had courted me, made me fall in love with him, and then systematically stripped me of my independence and my money. This wasn't a relationship. It was a long con. And I was their mark. The heartbreak was gone, replaced by a white-hot, clarifying rage. Oh, they had no idea who they were messing with. That discovery, it lit a fire under me. The sad, confused girl was gone. There was no more crying. It was time to get smart. It was time to get out. I spent the rest of that night in action mode. First, evidence. I took pictures of every single email, every document, every damning piece of text on that laptop. I saved them to a cloud account they knew nothing about. The next morning, I called in sick to work. The second David walked out the door, I made the most important phone call of my life. I found a lawyer online, a woman who specialized in cases like mine. I told her the whole story, my voice low and fast. She didn't sound surprised. She just sounded ready. She gave me a clear, calm list of things to do. Immediately, my first stop was the bank. I walked in, my heart pounding, and I opened a new bank account in my name only, at a branch across town. I transferred the tiny amount of money I still had in an old account they hadn't touched. It wasn't much, but it was a start. It was my escape fund. And then I had to do the hardest thing. I had to swallow my pride and ask for help. I called Clara, the friend I had ghosted and pushed away because of them. When she answered, I just burst into tears. I couldn't even form words at first, I just sobbed, "I'm in so much trouble, Clara. You were right about everything. Can you help me? And, where are you? I'm on my way." When she showed up at my door and wrapped me in a hug, it was the first time I had felt safe in over a year. My army was just one person, but she was fierce. The great escape was officially on. The future I had imagined with him was a complete illusion, a lie. But the feelings I had were real. The happiness I felt in the beginning was real. And you have to mourn that goodbye to the ghost of a life you thought you were going to have. David was sleeping, and I was just standing in our living room, looking around. I looked at the spot, on the floor where we'd had a picnic on our first date. I looked at the bookshelf, where he'd put up a shelf for my books. Every object held a memory, and all of them were now tainted, like a beautiful photo that had been burned around the edges. I picked up a picture of us from a vacation we took. We looked so in love. I just stared at his face in the photo and I thought, who are you? Were you ever real? Or was it all an act? I think the most painful possibility is that maybe he was real for a while, and he just wasn't strong enough to stop his family from poisoning everything good we had. Maybe he was a coward. And that's almost sadder than him being a monster. Tears just started rolling down my face, but they were quiet tears. It wasn't an angry cry. It was a funeral. I was mourning the man I thought he was, and the woman I was when I believed in him. I was mourning the future I had so carefully painted in my mind. I took the picture frame and I laid it face down. It was time to let it go. I just needed the right time to pull the trigger. And then, as if the universe wanted to give me one final push out the door, they threw a huge, fancy engagement party. It was the perfect storm. They would all be there, distracted, performing for their rich friends. It was my chance. So I went. I put on the beautiful, expensive dress they'd picked out for me. I put on the smile. I played the part of the happy, adoring fiancé one last time. The whole party was just disgusting. People congratulating us, telling me how lucky I was. The hypocrisy was so thick I could barely breathe. Then came the toasts. Eleanor got up, looking like the queen of the world. She talked about her wonderful son, and then she turned to me. She smiled this razor-sharp, sweet smile and said, to the whole room, "We were so thrilled when David brought Sophia home. She was a bit of a project, a diamond in the rough, you could say. But she has been wonderfully receptive to our guidance, and we have polished her into a woman who will be a real asset to this family." A project. Polished. An asset. She said it out loud. She said it with pride. The whole room politely clapped. I looked over at David, waiting for him to object, to defend me, to do anything. And he was just beaming at his mother. Beaming with pride. He caught my eye from across the room and he gave me this little wink, like we were in on a secret together. That wink. Tiny gesture was the most violent thing he had ever done to me. It told me he didn't just tolerate what they were doing, he was proud of it. He saw me as their success story. My spirit, broken and polished, was a gift he was proud to give his mother. In that moment, something inside me went cold and calm. I smiled back at him, a completely empty smile. And I thought, thank you for making this so easy. As soon as we got home, David, drunk on champagne and praise, passed out on the bed. The apartment was finally quiet. But my mind was electric. It was go time. Clara was parked a block away, our getaway car. I had already snuck my important documents and a few sentimental things to her place over the past week. All I had left to do was grab my go bag. A tiny bag with a change of clothes, my toothbrush, and my favorite book. I moved like a spy in my own home. I peeled off the ridiculously expensive party dress, and just let it fall to the floor in a heap. A snakeskin I was shedding. I wrote a note, just 2 sentences. I know about the emails and the money. My lawyer will be in touch. Nothing more. They didn't deserve my anger or my pain. They only deserved the consequences. And then, the last thing. The ring. I slid it off my finger. It felt like I'd been wearing a 10-pound weight. My hand felt so light, so free without it. I placed it right on top of the note on his nightstand. Let them keep it. It was never mine anyway. I stood at the door for just a second. I didn't feel sad. I just felt quiet. I thought about the girl who had walked into this apartment for the first time, so full of hope. And I made a silent promise to her that I would spend the rest of my life making sure no one ever dimmed her light again. And then I opened the door, slipped out into the night, and I walked away. And I did not look back. I was free, but I was also homeless, with almost no money, and about to enter a huge legal battle. I crashed on Clara's couch, and she was my guardian angel. She just let me be. She let me sleep, she let me cry, and she ordered my favorite takeout without me even asking. The texts and calls started immediately, of course. A flood of them. David, Eleanor, Brenda. First confusion, then fake concern, then pure, unfiltered rage. How dare I? After everything they'd done for me. My lawyer told me to block them all. And when I finally did, the silence that followed was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. After about a week, I knew I needed my own space. I found a studio apartment in a part of the city I'd never been to. I remember sitting on the floor on that first day, just like I had when I first arrived in this country. But this time, the silence wasn't lonely. It was peaceful. It was safe. I was starting from scratch, for the second time. But I wasn't the same person. The girl who arrived here was hopeful but naive. This woman, she was scarred, yeah, but she was also a fighter. She had been to hell and walked out on her own 2 feet. I bought myself a cheap kettle and made a cup of tea. And as I sat there. So, that brings us to now. It's been a few years. The legal fight was ugly, but I had the truth, and I had the evidence. I got a good portion of my money back. But honestly, the real victory wasn't financial. It was knowing that I stood up for myself, that I fought back, and that I won. I have had 0 contact with any of them since the day I left. They're just a bad memory. My life now, it isn't a fairy tale. It's better. It's real. My apartment is my haven. It's filled with my books, my plants, and my friends. I reconnected with my family back home and finally told them everything. Their love and support has been the best therapy. And Clara is still my ride or die. The book I was always dreaming of writing. Well, I wrote it. I poured all the pain, all the lessons, all the hope into that story. And finishing it felt like I was finally closing that chapter of my life and writing my own ending. I am so different from the person I was. I'm warier now, for sure. But I'm also stronger, and I know my own worth in a way I never did before. I came to this country looking for freedom, and I found it, just not in the way I expected. I had to free myself from a prison I didn't even know I was in. That's my story. A story about a great love, and a great betrayal. But in the end, I think it's really a story about the love you have to find for yourself. The kind that no one can ever take away. The kind that saves you. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to my channel for more inspiring African tales. Your support means the world to me, and it helps me continue sharing stories that touch hearts and change lives.